Prynawn da everyone, good afternoon all. Just usually start introducing employee ownership with an historic employee-owned business of Tower Colliery. For those of you who are unaware, British Coal closed Tower Colliery in 1994 on the grounds that it would be uneconomical to continue production. 239 jobs in Wales would have been lost, and the employees decided to pool their redundancy and purchase the mine, and it reopened in 1995, and with that we had 13 years extra of the mine staying open. So that's the earliest one with the Wales Co-operative Centre. So an example there very early on, which kind of adheres to what Deb and Glenn have talked about, an employee-owned business, safeguarding local business and safeguarding local jobs. So the centre was set up in the Wales Co-operative Centre in 1982 by the Wales TUC to combat mass redundancies, and the TUC believed at that time that cooperatives, mutuals and employee-owned businesses could play a vital role in combating mass redundancies. So to the present day then, the Wales Co-operative Centre delivers the Social Business Wales project. So Social Business Wales is funded by Welsh Government and European funds. Social Business Wales is part of what we call the Business Wales family. Within Social Business Wales, we have an Employee Ownership Wales team. Myself, the project manager, although I've been with the project since 2015, I've only been involved with project manager of employee ownership this last year or so. There are then 3 business advisors, Paul, who will speak shortly and will speak about some of the clients that we have in Wales. And also Branwen Ellis, who like myself joined the employee ownership team within this last year. Bran is our expert in legal structures. And last but by no means least is Sarah Owens, and she's been working with Paul over the last decade on employee ownership. What we also have is a fluent Welsh speaker within the team, and that has really helped us to engage with some of these businesses, especially those where their first language is Welsh. So we're a small team, but we're passionate about employee ownership, that's safe to say. So in the following slides, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at why employee ownership is important to Wales, what has been achieved in Wales, and what we have to do to double the number of employee-owned businesses in Wales. So why employee ownership is important to Wales then? It makes the economy more sustainable by keeping businesses open in Wales, retaining and creating jobs in Wales, retaining Welsh ownership, keeping money and company surpluses circulating in the Welsh economy. It's viewed as the missing middle of the foundational economy, so firms rooted in Wales, but they have the ability to sell outside of Wales. Employee ownership fits with the Welsh Government's objectives. So we see there on the left, the Welsh Government's Economic Action Plan, which is based not just on stimulating growth and productivity, but making Wales a fairer way to do business. Sharing ownership, we feel, in the business is a fair way to do business. On the right there is the Welsh Government's Wellbeing and Future Generations Act. This act represents the Welsh Government's legislation that demonstrates Wales's contribution to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. One of the areas in this act is a more equal Wales, and we've talked about that already. Deb has spoke about it, Glenn has talked about it. Employee ownership shares the wealth amongst its employees, and this is contributing to a more equal Wales. Another area of the Act, which Deb and Glenn have spoke about as well, is a more resilient Wales. Employee ownership has been shown to have better resilience in times of economic turbulence, and we've seen Deb speak there about COVID and how they're coping. So in summary, employee ownership is important to Wales to safeguard local jobs and businesses that have no succession plans. And there was some research done a few years back where 2/3 of businesses in Wales had no succession plan in place. So coming on to what has been achieved in Wales, There's about 20 employee-owned businesses in Wales at the moment, and 5 of these have become employee-owned within the last year, so in 2020. There's a healthy pipeline of clients coming through. We've got a great team who are passionate about employee ownership and have worked with me this last year to create a priority plan. And part of that plan was to create a dedicated Employee Ownership Wales website to act as a focal point for communications. And we are now seeing referrals coming through that website. Through Securing Social Business Wales, we have a full suite of business resources to support those transitioning to employee ownership. So we can offer a free options appraisal with no obligations. We can also offer business planning, financial planning, evaluation, VAT, tax advice. So we have a full suite of resources. We have great case studies in Wales of architectures, research, health, dentistry, IT. The one in the picture there is the TV company Cwmni Da. Food, financial management, consultancy, retail, training and scientific instruments. So we've built networks with accountants and law firms and can provide additional support to the employee-owned businesses. And the good news is that we're seeing an increase in appetite amongst the business community to explore the options of transitioning to employee ownership, both as a means to plan for succession and also to attract, retain and reward a talented, hard-working workforce and leave a legacy. Paul will talk, my colleague Paul, who I work with, will talk about some examples of clients in Wales. So, what do we have to do in Wales to double the number of employee-owned businesses? That's one of my favourite quotes. I love quotes. A goal without a plan is just a wish. So we need to set a clear strategy with a smart target. So not just how do we double the number of employees, when do we have to double it by? And that does make a difference when we start to say that. And I appreciate this is about getting it into the manifestos. Create a high-level leadership group to agree, coordinate and implement the strategy across partners. And partnership working we found with employee ownership is very important. We want Welsh Government to set a high priority with specific responsibilities and a champion at ministerial level. And I know Lee Waters is very fond of this model. Ensure adequate and appropriate finance is available, including things like the partnership fund. And ensure business succession is on every business advisor's agenda, and I really do mean that. They all need to think about succession very early on. Ensure the current level of subsidised resource, our website as well, is maintained for the future, because currently Social Business Wales will finish at the end of 2022. So with no further ado, I'll hand you over to my colleague now, Paul, who has worked with many of the clients in Wales. So over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Nick. Recognising we're short on time, I'm going to try and keep this fairly short, Chair, if that's okay. Nick has mentioned a range of different sectors of which we find employee ownership within Wales. And really just some observations really on the work that we've done over the last few years and the success that we have had. Whilst we now have a very diverse scattering of employee-owned businesses across all these different sectors, and Nick has mentioned those, we're particularly seeing take up employee ownership within what I would call knowledge-based businesses. In other words, businesses which are not capital intensive, but that are knowledge intensive, where the key skills and resources are actually on legs which can walk away from the business if they're not retained. So within that area, we have research companies, we have financial management companies, we have architects, we have scientific instruments producers, and IT companies, all of whom fit into that category. Now, why are these particular businesses drawn to employee ownership? We've heard a lot of very interesting reasons why they might be. in my experience, I think the one thing that's important is that these businesses are often smaller businesses within global terms. So we're talking about usually businesses which employ 10 to 50 people. They tend to work in teams anyway. They tend to be kind of multidisciplinary. So an architect practice, for example, will often have several people doing different things and coming together to do that, produce the particular plans for a particular client. They often are not that interested in ownership per se, really. Their interest really comes from business as usual. In other words, employee ownership gives them the opportunity to transition their business into a different format for ownership. But at the same time, essentially the business can carry on as usual. And that's quite important because continuity is important. And a lot of the people in these kind of businesses are getting their job satisfaction from the actual job that they do. They obviously want to be successful, but financial success is not the only item on their agenda. They tend to have quite close specific values and ethos, and they often, in my experience, know exactly where they're going. You know, when we work with a client, one of the first things that we do is we'll put together a company brief. That company brief sets out the key elements of the company and where it wants to go in the future, and obviously determining where employee ownership fits in that plan is critical. So that whole kind of scenario leads to a situation where these businesses really want to develop and go forward together, and within a very clear plan which fits in within their strategy. So one of the businesses we worked with over the last year is Wave Hill Research. Mark Willis is here, and I'm looking forward to hearing what Mark has to say about his experience in this. One of the things that struck me about Mark when he gave us his brief on his company, his directors gave us his brief on the company, was that they went to all the trouble of listing every single employee in the company and every single associate, and setting out what their role was within the company. And immediately I saw that, I knew that that employee ownership was something which potentially could work at Wave Hill. So I think it's probably best, Chair, if we now pass over to Mark and hear what his experience has been recently in completing his in sale of the business to employees.
Okay, yes, cheers, Paul. Thank you very much for that. Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Willis. I'm founder of Wave Hill, we've recently transitioned to an EOT with 54% of the business now employee owned. Wave Hill, yes, we're a social and economic research company. We have offices based in Aberdeen, Bristol, Newcastle, and also London. And I established the company back in 1992. So yes, as Paul said, we are a Polish-based business. But I must also say, looking at the sort of the header for this part of the presentation, I am definitely not an EOT expert, as are the previous contributors. However, I can share our experience. Okay. When did it all start? Well, it was actually back in the summer of 2019. We had a meeting of the directors here at Wave Hill, and we were discussing really the actual challenges faced by the company over the next few years, particularly in relation to succession planning. You know, I'd been with the company over 25 years. And, you know, we were also discussing how we could best reward the commitment of the staff here at Wave Hill. So from then, being a research company, we obviously researched the subject in quite a lot of detail and came up just with an outline plan and the type of model that we felt that would be best suited to our organisation. So anyway, these discussions accumulated in a couple of weeks ago with the setting up of Wavell as an employee-owned business. It was quite a bit of work over the previous sort of 6 to 10 months. But sort of with the assistance of the Wales Co-opeartive Centre, we actually transitioned fairly smoothly. We also worked with expert accountants who undertook an independent valuation and provided tax advice. And there was quite a bit of legal work as well for our lawyers to do. So, but meanwhile, the business carried on as normal. We felt it important that there was no disruption in our current, in the actual day-to-day running of the business. And yeah, that worked very well. So why did we do it? Yeah, succession was one of the reasons, as I previously noted. However, becoming an employee-owned business is a positive thing for a whole host of other reasons, we feel. These positives include allowing staff to have a greater say in the development and the running of the business, and importantly, in sharing in the benefits of the business as it continues to grow. This also in turn has a whole load of knock-on benefits such as staff satisfaction, staff retention, recruitment, and also business performance, as outlined in the previous presentations. And because the company staff also live within the local area, the community which it's based, it does create a link between the business and the local economy. There is hence, there is a link to community wealth building. So just to recap, we feel that by making this move, that we've really put a structure in place that will help safeguard the future of the business going forward. It rewards the staff for the hard work and commitment to the business. And finally, it enhances the impact that we can have at a local economy level as well. Okay.